You may have never thought about it. Maybe you place your rosary under your pillow, out of habit, out of affection for a tradition your grandmother passed down, or perhaps out of fear. But what if I told you that this simple act, almost forgotten, is seen in heaven as a sign that you still believe? Pope Leo XIV declares, "Sleeping with a rosary under your pillow is a silent confession of faith. It says to God, even tired, even wounded, even wordless, I still wait for you." Many go to sleep with heavy hearts, their souls unsettled. Some wrestle with insomnia, others are haunted by nightmares or anxieties that tighten around their chests when the lights go out. Then comes the pillow, and with it, the weight of the entire day. But the Pope reveals something that changes how we see this moment. There are pillows that become altars, and nights that become vigils, even if the soul doesn't realize it. Because when you place a rosary so close to your head, you're offering your sleep as a prayer. You're saying, "Lord, if I can't pray, let the rosary pray for me." And it does. The rosary is not a decoration. It is a weapon, a sign, a presence. Pope Leo XIV states it plainly. The rosary under your pillow is like a guardian. It does not sleep, it watches. And perhaps that's why so many people who sleep this way find peace, even in the middle of life's storms. If these words touch your heart, whisper within yourself, "Mary, watch over my sleep with your rosary." And remember, these words from the Pope rekindle faith in thousands of souls. Perhaps this message is the one God wanted you to hear today, because the Pope also shares a truth few understand with such tenderness. The rosary under your pillow is like an angel made of beads. It silently guards battles you do not even see. And here is a mystery few reflect on. While we sleep, the spiritual world stays awake. The soul rests, the body regenerates, but the invisible realm remains in motion. That's why the Pope insists, whoever sleeps with a rosary nearby never sleeps alone. The rosary is a prayer that continues, even without words, even in the silence of sleep. It remains a sign of intercession, offering, and protection. Saint Thérèse of Lisieux once said, "I used to fall asleep praying the rosary, and I trusted that the angels would finish it for me." Pope Leo XIV echoes that same sentiment with pastoral force. God hears the prayer you begin, even if you fall asleep before finishing it. And he goes further. He affirms that many invisible acts of salvation happen at night. Those who sleep with a rosary close to their hearts often wake up less anxious, less troubled, because Mary, during the night, walks through the depths of their unconscious. Pope Leo XIV shares a moving truth. There are nights when Mary walks from soul to soul, silently, placing drops of peace where hearts are broken. And she does this especially where a rosary is waiting, laid like a small vigil lamp upon the pillow. Mystics have long said that night is the moment when the soul, freed from the distractions of the day, becomes most receptive. And when that soul rests near a sacred object like the rosary, it enters, even without awareness, a kind of gentle, hidden protection. An Italian priest once shared with the Holy Father, "An elderly woman in my parish was very ill. She could no longer speak or move. But each night her daughter would place a rosary under her pillow, and this woman, once restless and agitated, would become extraordinarily calm. It was as if she was praying in silence from a place far beyond words." To this the Pope added, "The rosary, in the quiet of the night, opens paths that words alone cannot reach. Perhaps you sleep poorly. Perhaps your soul wrestles each night with thoughts, wounds, regrets. Maybe you take sleeping pills, or listen to soft music, or count the hours. But have you ever tried to entrust your night to Mary? Not only with words, but with a gesture. A rosary under the pillow is an act of trust, an act of surrender. an act of love. The Pope is clear. The devil hates this gesture because he knows that where the rosary lies, there is a mother, and where the mother is, he has no power. There's another mystery, rarely spoken aloud. Night is sometimes a place of spiritual attack. Dark thoughts, old memories, subtle temptations. But Mary, in her gentleness, doesn't enter with force. She enters with presence, and the rosary placed beside you becomes like a fragrance. It doesn't shout, but it changes the atmosphere. Pope Leo XIV encourages families to rediscover this habit. He says, "If children sleep with stuffed animals, let mothers also give them a small rosary. Let them know that Mary is gentler than any toy in the world." And you? Perhaps you haven't touched a rosary in years. Perhaps you have one in a drawer or deep in a handbag. What if tonight you took it out again? Not to recite 20 Hail Marys, but simply to place it on your pillow over your heart. Because Mary doesn't measure your love by how many prayers you say, but by the depth of your desire to remain close. The Pope also recounts a surprising story. A young woman distant from the church began placing a rosary under her pillow without even praying. "My grandmother used to do that," she said, "so I figured, why not?" Weeks later, she woke one morning with a strange sensation, as if someone had kept watch over her through the night. That same day, she went to church, for the first time in years, and she wept, not from sadness, from return. The Pope concluded, "It is not the rosary that saves, it is Mary, but Mary often comes through forgotten gestures." Perhaps you too are longing to return. Perhaps this small act, nearly nothing, will be the door through which everything begins anew. So try it, just one night, and see what happens. Pope Leo XIV emphasizes something many overlook. The sleep of the body is not the sleep of the soul. In other words, even when your eyes close and your body rests, your heart remains open, or not, to the spiritual world. And that is precisely where the rosary becomes a quiet, powerful bridge between the seen and the unseen. Sleeping with a rosary under your pillow is a way of entrusting your subconscious to Mary, that deep part of you where fears hide, where unhealed wounds rest, where forgotten questions still echo, the place even prayer sometimes cannot reach consciously. The Pope says again, the rosary does not replace prayer, but it protects it. It carries it. It extends it. Imagine, while you sleep, the beads near your head become a thread of light. A rosary is a chain, but not one that binds, one that connects to Mary, to God, to healing silence. Some might ask, but if I don't actually pray it, what's the point? And the Pope answers gently, it is the intention that matters, the gesture, the surrender. Mary is not an accountant of prayers. She is a mother. She understands the tired child who falls asleep before finishing a sentence. She smiles upon the soul that, even without words, simply draws near. And she acts, softly but surely. The Pope recounts how many testimonies have reached him from around the world. People share how peace returned to their nights just by sleeping with a rosary under the pillow. Some spoke of calmer dreams. Others woke with a new clarity, as if the night had performed a quiet work of healing. And the common thread in all these stories? The rosary laid close to the heart. It's not superstition. It's not a lucky charm. It's an act of faith. And even the quietest act of faith can move heaven. There's also a deeper sense of belonging hidden in this gesture. The Pope says it boldly. When you sleep with your rosary, you join an invisible army, a multitude of simple souls who whisper in the dark, I am not alone. I am one of the watchful. The world sleeps, but some remain awake, and sometimes these prayers cross paths. Without the prayers ever knowing each other, a child in Brazil, a grandmother in Poland, a young woman in Ghana, a monk in France, all united in a single act, a rosary under the pillow, a quiet offering of trust. And Mary, within this hidden network of love, moves among them. She visits, she brings peace. If you feel tired, lost, weighed down by life, if you no longer have the strength to pray aloud, or even to form words in your mind, place the rosary near you, not as an obligation, but as a letting go, and simply say, before you fall asleep, I don't know how to pray right now, but I give you my sleep. And you'll see. Silence will begin to change. It will no longer feel empty. It will become inhabited by a presence, by tenderness, by a mother. Pope Leo XIV reminds us that in today's world, where everything moves fast and objects are replaced without thought, the rosary remains a silent witness. It is not merely a religious string of beads. It holds within it tears, joys, struggles, and quiet returns to faith from those who have touched it with hope. Every rosary carries the imprint of a heart, the Pope says. That's why it is precious, even when worn or forgotten. He adds, an old frayed rosary hidden in a drawer has not lost its power. It is like a bell, waiting in silence to be rung again. Some rosaries have traveled across generations, given at baptisms, confirmations, funerals. Each time they carried a prayer, a promise, a breath of hope. They have rested beneath the pillows of the grieving, been clutched tightly in the pockets of the fearful, forgotten, and then found again. And in that rediscovery, often a quiet call resounds. The Pope urges us to see the rosary not only as a tool, but as a living memory. He says, when you hold your rosary, you are also holding the prayers of those who came before you. And so, sometimes, you are not praying alone. Even in silence, even in weariness, other unseen voices rise with yours. A mother once shared this testimony. My daughter was seriously ill. I couldn't pray. I was too tired, too worried. But every night, I placed her soft cloth rosary under her pillow. And I placed mine over my own heart, and I simply whispered, Mary, take care of us. My daughter slowly recovered, and I found peace again. The Pope reflects on such stories with a simple truth. God never ignores silent prayers, and Mary never delays in carrying them. There are also those who have returned to faith through this humble gesture. One man, a former soldier, had walked away from religion, from prayer, even from hope. One day, in a house he inherited from his aunt, he found an old rosary tucked between the pages of a missal. He put it in his pocket, without thinking, and that night, for no clear reason, he placed it under his pillow. And in his sleep, he dreamt of his aunt. She said nothing. She simply smiled. The next day, he went to church, for the first time in 30 years, and today he says, I didn't go looking for God. He reached for me through that rosary. You see, this gesture is more than a routine. It is a connection, a thread between the living and the departed, between the visible and the invisible, between your tired heart and the immaculate heart of Mary. The Pope says with quiet authority, what science cannot explain, faith lives in silence. So don't dismiss small actions. Don't tell yourself, it's nothing. Because often, it's within the nothing that God slips in unnoticed. Tonight, once again, as you prepare for bed, take your rosary. Not out of obligation, not to do the right thing, but because you are loved, and because Mary is waiting, not to measure your worth, but to embrace you with a love the world can't offer. Say to her, simply, in the quiet of your soul, Mother, I give you my night. You know better than I what needs to be said. And sleep, gently, peacefully. You are not alone. Pope Leo XIV closes his reflection with a striking image. When you sleep with a rosary under your pillow, Mary lies beside you, and heaven draws near without making a sound. This is not mere poetic language, it is a deep spiritual truth. Because what God desires from you is not perfection, but closeness. And sometimes true closeness begins in the stillness of the night, when all masks fall away and the soul finally finds rest. In the intimacy of sleep, when no one is watching and no one is judging. There remains a pure gesture, a free act, letting Mary be near. The Pope also says, "The one who wakes with a rosary under their cheek often rises with a peace they can't explain." And he adds a word of comfort for all who carry wounds. Even if you haven't prayed, even if you've fallen, even if you doubt, Mary will not leave you as long as your heart isn't closed. She does not push, she does not demand, she is simply there. And her silence soothes, like a mother keeping watch at her child's bedside, saying nothing, but whose presence alone is enough to chase away fear. Yes, there will still be restless nights. Yes, you might still cry quietly into your pillow, but what you may not realize is that a supernatural tenderness is already watching over you. And that rosary, simple, light, perhaps a little worn, has become a bridge between your unrest and heaven's peace. Pope Leo XIV invites every home to revive this forgotten gesture, not as a superstitious habit, but as an act of love handed down through generations. He says, if every home had a rosary under one pillow, fear would retreat. Night would no longer be a trap. It would become a promise. And if you're a parent, give this practice to your children, not as a burden, not as a religious rule, but as a sign that they are never left alone in the dark. And if you live alone, remember, you are never truly alone. Every bead of your rosary has been touched by prayer, some spoken, some silent, by hearts across time. You belong to a family greater than blood. You have found a shelter where even the weary soul is awaited. So tonight, one last time, take your rosary in hand. Not to impress God, not to earn something, but because you are deeply loved. And because Mary is waiting, not to test your devotion, but to wrap you in a love no one else can give. Say to her, softly, from your heart, I give you my night, Mother. You know the words I cannot say. And fall asleep, slowly, gently, in peace, because whoever sleeps with Mary never wakes up alone.